Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt from Studio North. I have to drive a long way today from Mid-Coast down to Portland to the University of Maine Law School. So, Matt Continetti, I am hoping that the Commentary Gang gets their podcast up and out early. Can you make me that promise?
It's ready for you now, Hugh. We recorded it
right
after the debate last night.
Oh, you did the emergency pod last night? Okay.
As soon as you're
Matt,
done,
you are the author of... I'm going to download Commentary, and it will be ready for me. You are the author of the book, The Right. You are the author of the forthcoming book, The Good and the Bad. But mostly you are a very, very objective observer of things like we watched last night. And I got to just ask you at the beginning, do you know who the running mates for Franklin Roosevelt and Wendell Willkie were in 1940?
I do not.
Henry Wallace, the most left-leaning nominee of a major party until Kamala Harris came along, and the guy from Oregon, McNary. Now, if those two had been debating, do you think Germany's invasion of Poland might have come up? And do you think maybe Japan's invasion of China and Japan's threat to the United States might have come up?
Well, if the anchors from CBS News were moderating the debate, Hugh, neither of those issues would have come up. And I think what we saw last night in the debate that was very good for the Republican running mate, J.D. Vance, it was another case of 3-on-1, where the moderators interjected themselves into the debate despite saying at the outset that they weren't going to. And it led to some kind of absurd moments. But Senator Vance clearly rose above them, and I think demonstrated command and fluency from the get-go.
Oh, it was very impressive. But I'm almost near despair about American media, Matt. I've been a critic for a long time, but it's fallen into utter disrepute. It's as though Xi Jinping is Voldemort, and he must not be named by CBS, ABC, or CNN. Let me borrow a line from John Podhoretz. Am I taking crazy pills?
You're not, Hugh. What struck me while watching the debate last night and becoming annoyed with the moderators was that I think there might be a difference between the network anchors and the cable anchors. We've had 3 debates this season. The first debate was moderated by Jake Tapper and Dana Bash of CNN, and I thought they've done the best of the 3 mainstream media moderating teams. The other 2 debates, one was ABC and the other was CBS. The CNN anchors, despite having bias, we know about the CNN, they actually kind of had a better grasp of what politics is about today. I think they kind of understand what issues are being discussed in the nation's capital, what issues are more important to voters. The network anchors, I think, are kind of removed. I think there's a bubble within the media bubble. And if you're not actually in the fray every day, as the cable anchors are, you are completely lost and kind of at sea on your little liberal bubble ship. And so I think when we look at debates 4 years from now, we have to take a serious look at moderation. And I was just musing to myself this morning, maybe we can get AI to moderate the debate. I mean, maybe we should just
Siri would have done a better
AI
job last
moderator.
night.
Yeah.
They could have spent 90 minutes on Iran, on 10/7, on Hezbollah, on Lebanon, about America's role in the world. They could have spent 90 minutes doing what all of the world had been focused on, which is that was a major world event yesterday, Matt. It's like if they had held the debate on the day that Hitler invaded Poland in 1939, and they hadn't brought it up except for 5 minutes. Now, I want to explain something. I've done 5 debates.
We should point out, right? Ukraine wasn't mentioned at all.
Not once. And Ukraine is J.D. Vance's, Achilles
kind of a big
heel.
Story. Yeah.
I have done 5 debates with networks, 4 with CNN, 1 with NBC. I know that they are massive productions. It's not just the moderator's fault. The head of the network comes, the head of the news division comes. There are 30 to 50 people involved, and the bubble is almost 100%, unless someone like me shows up, gets inserted like Mary Catherine Ham, is almost all rote left wing. They are no one like you, Matt. And Commentary magazine's kind of neocon, center left, center right, not conservative, not NatCon, nothing like that. Normal. Nothing like that is in the room. The question set, 3 rounds on abortion. Even one round would have been too many, but 3 rounds on abortion, Matt?
Well, and let's not forget the 10 minutes spent on childcare. The economy came in a weird way. It wasn't about jobs. It wasn't even about rising prices. J.D. Vance had to go out of his way to mention them, and I think he did so effectively. But it was about housing, which is an issue. I would just say that I have a test, and I think I've told you about it before, Hugh, which is the climate change test. And I stop taking moderators seriously when they bring up climate change, which is an issue that is huge in the media bubble, but not really discussed or of a high concern to the
Ever.
American. Right. And so
Ever.
what did these moderators do? They brought up climate change in the second question in relation to the devastation wrought by Hurricane Helene. And now I think there are a lot of questions involving Hurricane Helene. There's questions about preparedness. There are questions about what went wrong that created this awful devastation. There are huge questions about what the Biden administration and Vice President Harris are doing right now to help the victims of Hurricane Helene. But climate change, that is not a primary or secondary issue in my mind in concern to this devastation brought by the hurricane. But that's what the moderators did on question 2. And so from that point on, I said, well, it's 3-on-1. And the remarkable thing, though, Hugh, and I keep emphasizing this, but I will continue to do so, is that J.D. Vance was unflappable. He was unflappable. He never lost his cool. He responded to the moderators, I think, very effectively. And he pointed out, look, you said you weren't going to fact check us, but now you're trying to fact check me. So let me fact check you. And of course, he had the facts in his pocket. He knew what he was talking about, unlike the moderators.
And he did
And I
not
think
get
that's what
angry.
viewers will see. And he did not get angry.
He did not get angry. Now, Matt Continetti, the second question in the ABC News debate was about abortion. They had 3 questions on abortion, 2 questions on child care, and then we ended with J6. Do you think Liz Cheney helped them plan the debate? I really have no idea how they ended up with this question set that ignored China and Ukraine, the DOD, Chinese spies in New York, Turkey bribing. By the way, I listened to the commentary pod about Eric Adams, and I kept saying, what's it tell us about Turkey? Forget about Eric Adams, he's a moron, but what does it tell us about our NATO ally Turkey that they're bribing our elected officials? There's a spy in the New York governor's office. The Chi-Coms are everywhere in the country. Are we just fundamentally an unserious country now?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the answer is pretty close to yes on that question, Hugh. I mean, I look at it from the foreign policy dimension, and you think about how, for the past year, the Biden response to all of the turmoil in the Middle East is don't escalate, Israel. Don't respond, Israel. Take the win, Israel, in April after Iran attacks you directly for the first time in the history of the Islamic Republic. And what's happened? Chaos. An arc of chaos stretching from Ukraine down through the Red Sea in the Gulf of Aden, and, as you've been pointing out on the show, a much more belligerent China in the South China Sea. So, unfortunately, this administration is not serious. And I think the connections between this administration and the mainstream media are very real. And so the mainstream media also reflects this unseriousness. There wasn't one question about the current president, Joe Biden. What is his
You
condition?
came to my next question. It's obvious that the current president is incapacitated and that the current vice president's constitutional duty is to convene the cabinet to discuss that. He can be present in doing so. Ought that to have been asked last night?
Absolutely. I mean, when you consider Biden's response to the hurricane, I think the hurricane is a huge issue. We have 3 issues that are of real pressing concern right now. We have a war in the Middle East where we need to stand with Israel against Iran and take this opportunity to end the Iranian nuclear program and really pressure that regime to the point of where I think the Iranian people will collapse itself. We have the hurricane and Hurricane Helene and these communities in the Southeast that have been absolutely devastated. And we have this dock workers strike that just began 40 days before an election, interrupting global commerce, raising energy prices potentially amidst this turmoil in the Middle East. Where's Joe Biden? He was at the beach. And then when he's asked about what he was doing to prepare for the hurricane, whether he's in charge, he gave this kind of peevish answer where he said, well, I was on the phone for 2 hours. So, of course, everything's under control. And then when he was asked about Israel's retaliatory strike against the Houthis in Yemen, he thought that the reporter was asking about the dock workers. And so he said, well, I hope the sides can come together and reach an agreement. This is a major concern, I think, for most Americans. Who is in charge?
Well, and American sailors are under fire every day in the Red Sea, every single day, and it didn't come up. Big question before I keep you for an off-air segment, Matt. What was the consequence of that debate on the election? I think Hugh Hewitt thinks it might have moved Pennsylvania decisively towards Trump, but what do you think?
I think it could have a small effect on the election. You know, of course, the conventional wisdom is that people don't vote on the basis of vice president. But the conventional wisdom before June was that debates don't really matter. And of course, the first debate between Trump and Biden mattered hugely. So this debate might matter as well. I think people come away from the debate with two reactions, Hugh. The first is J.D. Vance is a perfectly plausible president. And he made, I think, a lot of people reevaluate maybe their preconceived notions of who J.D. Vance is. And the second reaction is Tim Walz is a completely implausible vice president and president. And I think that could hurt the Harris ticket because Harris has really made only one major decision as a candidate for president. And that was her vice presidential selection. And clearly, based on last night, we can conclude she chose poorly.
Now, I'm going to talk with Matt off air about whether or not legacy media can be rebuilt because it's a kind of a crisis for them after the ABC and CBS moderation. But I do want you to focus. I posted this maybe a half dozen times last night. Kamala Harris had one job and one choice, and she picked the guy who called himself a knucklehead. She picked Tim Walz instead of Josh Shapiro because Josh Shapiro is Jewish. Just let that settle in. She would pick an entire White House staff and cabinet in the same haphazard fashion based upon her San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, Montreal, D.C. politics. And it would be a disaster for this country. That's the big takeaway from last night. Stay tuned. I'm going to come back with Matt and just talk to him about the media for a second. So, Matt, I spent 3 weeks with the NBC folks. Lester and Kristen, of course, were my co-moderators for the GOP debate. And you'll end up doing these, I think, in the future. I'm aging out of this space, and you're serious enough and respectable enough to do it. You'll be amazed. They get everyone from the top of the network to the head of the news division to 40 people. You'll be amazed. 12 rehearsals, dress rehearsals, question meetings. It's absurd how much effort goes into this when artificial intelligence could do it. Is there any saving network news?
No. I don't think there's any saving network news. I think our best hope lies in diverse media sources. I don't have any experience in debate prep or organization, Hugh, as you do, but my colleague, Eliana Johnson at the Washington Free Beacon, participated in the News Nation debate of the Republican primary candidates earlier this cycle.
Did a wonderful job.
Yep. And I think they did a wonderful job. I think Eliana and Megyn Kelly did a wonderful job. And we're living in a media environment now where these debates command huge audiences. I'll be very curious to see how many people tuned in last night. But there's so much media. There's so much content to consume. There are so many ways a candidate can interact with the media or with the audience that I think the impact is kind of dispersed. And so we have to look toward alternatives, figure out how we can create debates that go around the mainstream media, because I think our experience this cycle shows that they are beyond safe.
They're shattered, and I think podcasting is probably, like blogging was the first blow, then Twitter X came along as the second blow, Facebook, Instagram, and the third blow is that serious people get together and talk about serious subjects, as with the Commentary podcast, so that you actually learn something and you get a diverse group of people, and someday some podcast will emerge that has a serious, someone like Andrew Sullivan talking with someone like you on a daily basis. It will emerge where there will be a left-right kind of serious conversation. But it's done. It's finished. And I don't know who's going to pay any money for it. Do you?
No, I will say this: so much depends on the candidates too. And I think, despite the moderation during the CBS debate last night, JD Vance did a very good job, and the conversation was civil, and it was actually kind of surprising the extent to which both candidates played nice. They said that they agreed. They wanted to focus on policy. It was a very different sort of debate than the ones that we've been used to. And so I think there's an appetite for debates like this. I think candidates, if you have the right people, can perform in debates like this. The question is the forum. Where do they come together? And for many years, we had the Commission on Presidential Debates. That kind of collapsed based on the experience in 2020. This cycle, 2024, we thought, okay, we'll bring candidates together. The candidates will make arrangements with networks and they'll decide and negotiate the rules. I think we've had a slightly more interesting level of debate this cycle, despite the problems with the moderation. But heading into 2028, conservatives really need to think seriously about, okay, how can we make sure that our views are represented in these debate meetings, and we have at least one debate featuring a fair host. I mean, we're talking a lot about why there isn't going to be another debate between Harris and former President Trump. And I think one of the real reasons is, yeah, Trump doesn't want to have another debate, but why should he? He
Why
debated
should?
with
And
CNN
we're
anchors,
out of time,
and he
Matt. But
debated with ABC. It's time to
yeah,
have the
you,
Fox
you don't
anchors,
walk
right?
into
And
another
she won't do
ambush.
it.
You don't do it.
Right,
Matt
exactly. We don't do
Continetti,
it.
thank you. I'll be listening to commentary today. Thank you for doing the emergency podcast last night. You've saved my drive.
Thanks, you.